Welcome to this episode of the Traidar Traitors podcast. My name's Matthew and I'm a writer, reality competition TV fanatic and a 100% faithful. Promise. The Traidar is a deep dive into each episode of the TV show filled with mind games, missions and murder, The Traitors, beginning with the most recent US version of the show, streaming now on Peacock and BBC. Thanks so much for listening in again. It's lovely to have new followers on social media and on all the podcast platforms. It's great to hear from you too, so drop me a wee hello message and let me know what you're enjoying about the podcast or anything else you'd like to hear included. I have a great guest on today's episode, but before I introduce them, let's talk about the latest Traitors developments and updates in TT News. Firstly, an update on the board game, which I mentioned in a previous episode. Two games companies, Vivid Goliath and Identity Games, are partnering with All3 Media International to distribute the official Traitors board game in the UK and Ayr, and that will be on shelves in September 2023. Now, although this is still 8 months away, UK contestants Wilf Webster and Hannah Bichkowski attended a launch event on the 24th of January at the Toy Fair held in the London Olympia. The event is only held once a year, so the game makers obviously want to take the chance to showcase the game ahead of time rather than wait until 2024, and I'll keep you updated on any pre-order information. Some UK Traitors news. Studio Lambert, who produced The Traitors UK, and All3 Media released The Traitors, the official soundtrack, on Spotify and Apple Music on January the 27th. It's essentially a fantastic playlist of 74 mainly contemporary songs used in the show. It's all very haunting and ominous, and you'll definitely recognise some of the instrumentals from the most dramatic moments in the programme. Highlights include Florence and the Machine, Tribal Blood, Portals, composer Ludovico Einaudi, and various songs from Zwei, including an incredible sinister remake of Toxic by Britney Spears. Finally, a combination of UK and US news. As well as being available on demand on BBC iPlayers, The Traitors US has now been added to the live broadcast schedules on BBC One and BBC Three in the UK. The show will be available on BBC One as double bills on Wednesday nights at 10:40pm for 5 weeks from the 25th of January. And it will also be available on BBC Three on various nights around 8pm across 3 weeks, beginning Tuesday the 24th of January. Today on the Traidar, we're taking a look at episode 5 of The Traitors US, and to help me do that, I have a brilliant guest along. Let's meet them. My guest this episode on the Traidar is John Gilmour Smith. John plays guitar in Glasgow-based blues and rock band Bison Hip, along with fellow members Paul, Malcolm, Stephen and Graham. The band formed during the COVID lockdown via Zoom and released their EP, Dear Greens and Blues, in March 2022. John, welcome to the Traidar. How are you doing?
I'm good, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well, thanks. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, you might tell me a little bit more about the EP and the music later on. Firstly, maybe you can tell us a bit more about how did the band form? How did this come about during lockdown?
Well, we've all known each other for a long time, probably 30 years, maybe more, and we were having one of those, those Zoom catch-ups that everyone did during lockdown where we couldn't see anyone. And Paul was the guy who mentioned that we just happened to have all the constituent members to start a band, and we made this joke about we'll start a band in our 50s, and we all laughed, and a few whiskies later we all thought it was a fantastic idea, and the next morning everyone still wanted to do it, and we started writing and working towards coming out of lockdown, which we did. So yeah, it was like, it wasn't really a big plan. We'd half mentioned it in the past, but on that night it just seemed to be a great idea, and we went for it, and it's just rolled and rolled since then, and we've recorded, had a couple of EPs out, and working on it, finishing off our album now and getting ready to gig. So yeah, it's been great fun.
Fantastic. That sounds like how all the best ideas start, I reckon.
A couple of malt whiskies, yeah.
Yep. What about the name of the band? Where does the name Bison Hip come from?
it was a Paul special. He just had a couple of names that he was kicking around. At one point, the word lip was involved, and someone made a joke about we should make it hip because at our age, one of us is going to have a replacement hip soon. And that joke just kept going, and before we know it, we decided on Bison Hip, and that was it. It's nothing particularly clever, unfortunately.
I see. Now, you've obviously been very busy working on music and recording and getting things ready for your album release.
Yeah.
But you've found time to watch some of the Traitors US.
I have indeed, yeah.
When did you discover it? How did you come across it?
I didn't know that much about it. I saw advertised on TV for the British one and thought it looked quite interesting. Saw a little bit of it. I liked it, but I'm not a massive Claudia fan, so I kind of dismissed it. And then it was later on when I was pointed in the direction of it, and I started to watch it then. And I'm really enjoying the US one. It's very different. Probably just the difference between British people and American people. There's a difference in, their personalities and stuff like that. I found it quite interesting.
Yeah. Now I'm going to have to move past what you've just said about Claudia. Now I realise this is an audio medium. I'm holding up
Claudia's
John
book.
a picture of. Now I did find Claudia's book for £1 in the
Yeah,
works.
it's £1. Yeah,
And,
I noticed that. Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't resist, but
Yeah.
I do like Claudia. And am I right in thinking, John, we're going to discuss episode 5 today? You haven't gone beyond that, so you don't know what's coming next.
No, I'm on the cliffhanger of the end of episode 5 at the moment.
Okay, great. So we'll get to that in due course. Now, John, if you were playing the Traitors, what do you think you would prefer to be, a faithful or a traitor?
Oh, I'd love to be a traitor. Absolutely. As soon as it started and as you got to get introduced to everybody, I thought, I definitely want to be the traitor then. Absolutely.
Okay. Do you think you'd be quite good at lying?
Yeah, I'd be great at it. But more than anything, I think I would love being able to be responsible for the chaos. I know that even as into episode 5, some of the guys are starting to struggle with some of the ethics of that, but I think I'd really enjoy watching them squirm, yeah.
Yeah, well, leading on from there, I'm going to ask you, John, something to ask all the guests. What is your biggest betrayal? So that could be your biggest, best, worst, or funniest lie that you've ever told.
My biggest betrayal, I would say, well, probably the silliest betrayal ever was many, many years ago, about 20 odd years ago. My friend and I were in Edinburgh on a night out, and we were sitting right across from a bunch of very well-spoken students who were obviously going to some university in Edinburgh, and they were having a discussion about astrology and tarot and various things, and I had that kind of interest that all people into rock music have an interest in some of the occult at some point. So I knew a little bit about the Gold and Dawn tarot and what have you. So I started talking to them, and I convinced them I could read tarot, which I couldn't. I just knew a little bit about it. And I'd recently read quite a couple of cold reading books that I got out of the library. So I was trying out cold reading. I must have impressed them enough that they thought I genuinely could read tarot.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit confused about what they were asking, but they invited me to come over to a party, which I thought was a party, and it turned out I was being invited to do a tarot reading. And then I was going to read the tarot, and they were going to tell me why it was nonsense. But so I turned up for the party, then they were expecting a tarot reading, and I turned up for the party with no tarot cards, thinking I was going to dance the night away. So that didn't go down very well, and it wasn't a very successful night. I think we betrayed them because they had a very different idea of what we were going to do that night.
Yep. So you were a better liar than you realised you were.
Yeah, I obviously managed to convince them. That might have been because they were drunk as well, I suppose.
That does make me think you'd probably be quite a good traitor in the game.
Yeah, I think it could be.
We're going to put that to the test, actually, John, because we are going to play the Traidar Traitor. Our goal throughout the episode from here on in is to tell one lie to one another. Okay. The lie has to be a fabrication or a made-up fact. So it can't be a fake opinion, like saying you think Kate is horrible and annoying when actually you think she's reality TV gold. At the end of the episode, we each have to put our traitor hunting skills to the test and decide what we thought the other person's lie was.
Okay.
Does this sound good?
That sounds excellent.
Now, before I move on, I actually have to reveal last week's lie. So in last week's episode, I played the Traidar Traitor with the listeners. I don't know if anybody managed to guess it. A couple of people have made suggestions but are completely wrong. The thing that I made up last week was that in the note, that Kate and Brandy wrote, there was no picture of Alan in the corner. That was totally made up. I just created that. So it wasn't true at all. There was no picture. Or if there was, I didn't see it. So it's time to discuss episode 5. Let's go. So, episode 5 begins with some ongoing discussions amongst the traitors from the previous episode, and they're thinking about who to murder off, and it seems like they've narrowed it down to Ryan or Kyle. So we're left wondering which one they're going to pick, and we move on to breakfast as we always do. The players start to come in. There's some funny moments with Kate, as there always are. I noticed that Kate describes Rachel's personality as abrasive and therefore annoying, which I find quite ironic coming from Kate. John, Kate's quite a divisive character. What are your thoughts on Kate?
I love Kate. I was incredibly disappointed when Brandy went out because I think they were gold together. They're unbelievably annoying, but like they kind of try to be. So yes. Whereas some of the other ones are annoying and they don't even know it. But I think Kate and Brandy knew they were like that. I think she's fantastic. She pulls incredibly funny faces and clearly doesn't really like anyone. So I think she's great.
Yeah, I don't think she's too bothered about making friends.
No.
I think she's been on reality TV before. Like, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
Now, when Christian and Cody come into breakfast, they obviously have to act like they don't know what's going on and they don't know who's still left to come. Sari is not impressed with their acting. She describes Christian as being like a B-movie actor, and she thinks that Cody just looks like a nervous wreck, and that if she can spot that, everybody can spot that. We've noticed this over the weeks, that Cody seems to kind of be struggling a bit with his role as a traitor. He often looks quite nervous, quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think he's he wants to be friends with people. That's obviously in his nature, and I think he struggles because as people are talking to him, maybe in a trusting way, I think he's really struggling with that.
I think so.
Whereas Christian's, he's quite a big personality, and I think at times I thought he was going to get caught early when Brandy was onto him early. Yeah. I thought he'd get caught because he was almost trying too hard. Like pulling slightly exaggerated gasps when he'd find out who he'd killed, and it seemed a little bit too much. But he seems to recover from that, and Cody seems to be like the one that's really toiling.
I think because Christian's so kind of over the top all the time that it's probably starting to not look like bad acting. I think everybody just thinks that's what he's like.
That might be what he's like. Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. So the players come in one by one, and as the last person arrives, we realise that Ryan is gone. And at that point, we flash back to the discussion the night before, and we figure out why they decided to murder Ryan. Their theory is that he's so friendly that no one will really understand why anybody would get rid of him, and because Cody and Christian are quite pally with Ryan, no one will suspect that they would do that to their friend. So that seems to be the tactic that they've gone with. Alan arrives soon after in another one of his fab outfits, Scottish as Scottish can be, and I get the impression that Alan's actually having the time of his life doing this. He seems to be really getting into it. Am I right in thinking you're a bit of a fan of Alan?
Yeah, I like Alan. He's he plays the part really, really well in this. He's got, frankly, the worst Scottish accent from a Scottish person I've ever heard, which is really funny, and I don't know what that's got to do with Aberfeldy, quite honestly, but he really, really plays the part well, and I think he's ideal for the role, and maybe that's why I like this one more than perhaps the British one, because he's got a bit of something about him.
Yeah, he does. He's playing it quite differently than Claudia.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on online about Alan's accent, particularly the way that he says dollars.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's hilarious, isn't it? It's hilarious.
It is. We'll probably come across that when we get to the mission.
Yeah.
My favourite part of these breakfast ceremonies is Alan taking the picture of the person who's just been murdered and throwing it on the floor.
Yeah. He's got a couple of seconds of sympathy before he just tosses it aside. Yeah.
He does. I was reading, there was some interview or something with it was Shelby or Kate or something online saying it. I think at some point he stops doing that. I think he was damaging the floor, and the people that own that house had to step in and say, "Can you tell him to stop doing that, please?"
Right.
So that's why that ends at some point.
You're telling me it's not actually his castle then?
I'm sorry to break the illusion. It's not really Alan's
really
castle. I know, gutted.
So Ryan wasn't reality TV though. He was. He was a swimmer, wasn't he?
Yeah, right. Ryan was an Olympian. He's like really successful. Like he's got something like 12. Let me see. I do have it written down somewhere. Yeah, he's a 12-time Olympic. 12 different medals at the Olympics. Well, so he was one of the few people I did know before the programme.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Olympics, and I don't remember ever seeing him.
Now, something a bit shifty happens at breakfast here. Cody takes it upon himself to tell Kyle that before he was murdered, the last thing that Ryan said to him last night was that he had some suspects in mind, including Kyle and Ari and Rachel. And Kyle immediately picks up on this as not being quite right. He sees straight through Cody's lie. This is something that has happened on other versions of the Traitors, and this is not a spoiler. Something very similar happens in the Traitors Australia. One of the Traitors takes it upon themselves to contrive this mad lie about someone who was just murdered, and it does not work out well. So Cody's doing the same thing here. Doesn't seem like a very good idea.
It almost seemed like had he maybe mentioned one name, he might have got away with that, but the fact that he actually gives the three names, that it just seemed too much.
Yeah. So after breakfast, we move around the house and the players start to have some discussions. Siri notices that Kate and Rachel are really not getting on very well, and Kate gets up and walks out of the room as soon as Rachel comes and sits down, and Siri starts to wonder if maybe she can use this against him in some way, which is very clever of her to pick up on these things. Quentin picks up on Kyle and he starts to suspect him. He thinks that Kyle's very good at directing people down the wrong road at the round table and shifting attention away from himself and maybe from people who actually are traitors. And that's something that comes back again later in the episode. Kyle's kind of under the spotlight here. It's really fascinating, and obviously the audience, we know that Kyle's not a traitor at all. It's fascinating the theories that they come up with, the way that they try and convince themselves about who's a traitor.
I could understand that one about Kyle, because he was very vocal at every round table, and there is that thing, isn't there, sometimes that almost you're saying too much, and it felt a little bit like, had I been sitting on the faithful side, I might have had that. Where I never felt that about Kate, regardless of the fact that she was so mouthy. But Kyle, I felt as if he was definitely trying to manipulate it in a direction. And I suspect he was, but just not the direction that everyone else thought he was,
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's something that I talked about in the previous episode. Kyle stepped up in the last mission to be a kind of leader. And I often think that's maybe not a great idea in games like this, to be so vocal and to try and be in charge. It just makes yourself look a bit suspicious, I reckon. I think it's better to be a little bit more in the background in this game to get further ahead. So, speaking of missions, we move on to the mission for this episode, which involves some strange masked figures in a church, which is quite creepy. For some reason, it's never really explained. As soon as they walk in, Angelica is having a bit of a meltdown about the people in masks. I don't know if she's got some sort of underlying fear here. We just see her getting very upset. No idea what's going on there. I've got some thoughts on this mission. John, what do you think about this mission?
This is my favourite mission so far. I think. I know what you mean about Angelica when she first came in. She also suffers from a disease where she has to do a funny walk when she enters the breakfast room every morning. I don't know why, but I liked this mission because it was the proper first time I felt as if they started to get really against one another. The two teams were really pitted against one another in a way that I hadn't seen before. Up to that point, for the most part, they were relatively together. Even when they were separated into teams, they were trying to. This felt a little bit less about the common cause and more about individual teams this time. So I liked it, and the fact that one team did really well and the other did really badly was made it quite interesting.
Yeah, the team doing badly, of course, being Kate and Rachel's team, who, I mean, Kate just seems annoyed by Rachel's existence anywhere near
Yeah.
her, so that doesn't make for great team play.
No, and it was great because all the way through it, it kept, every time it cut to Rachel, she would say, I'm really great at something, and then she'd be really terrible at it right after it. So, and Kate's face all the way through it was hilarious.
Yeah. Similarly, Kyle does this terrible job of just remembering numbers. And the time it takes him to walk from the confession booth to the altar, he's already forgotten what Alan said.
Totally
I think he even does it
about
a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what. Now you like the fact that they're in teams and it's competitive. I sort of wonder. On one hand, I feel like, well, they're all competing for the same money that's going into the same prize fund, so it's not really competitive. On the other hand, I understand they want to maybe mess with them psychologically, and they want to kind of create enemies.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the purpose behind it all.
Yeah, because I think there was they create two different types of teams. They create the actual teams that are playing against one another, but there was also almost like teams within teams.
Yeah.
Because I know what you mean, but there is a competitive nature in the sense that ultimately everybody wants the money. So they're actually competing against everyone else in some shape or form. So it's that whole, I want to work as a team, but I know ultimately I'm going to have to get rid of you. So I thought the dynamic of that was the most interesting one yet. You could see a difference in the faces of those that weren't doing well in it.
And I suppose it's effective as well because, I mean, you've sort of just said this, that although they're creating enemies, they're also creating strong bonds amongst the teams, and therefore that exaggerates the tension later when they're going to, or they might have to turn on one another. So maybe that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to go really hard on this task. You said it's your favourite yet. My note is dumbest task in the show. I'll say no more.
I know what you mean about the actual task itself. The kind of the physical task, I didn't think was hugely interesting. But I enjoyed the task the most just because of how different they were all starting to act in it. The previous task, which was the wheel that they were in asking questions, was an interesting task, but there was a little bit of tension there, but not as much. They were still being quite friendly with one another, and I felt as if that's the first time I started to see proper fractures in it, which is what made me like it.
I see. That's fair enough. That makes sense. So by the end of the mission, they win $20,000, no thanks to one of the teams, which means the total prize fund at this point is $114,900. So, we're getting quite far into this big prize fund here.
Doesn't Alan round the dollars up later on?
He does. He likes to. That happens a couple of times in the series. He's generous. He rounds $100 up here and there. So
is it real dollars? Or is it Alan dollars?
I think it could be Alan dollars and his funny accent.
Yeah. We used to have a caravan in Aberfeldy, and I don't remember anyone anywhere had an accent like that. I really don't.
No, it's this weird creation. I don't know where it's come from.
It's so strange.
Yeah. So after the mission, we are back to the house, and it's time for some pre-banishment discussions. And here's where Kyle begins to tell people about what Cody said at breakfast. Although he doesn't name Cody, he's quite wary. So he tells people that someone said something to him that was a bit suspicious, but he wants to keep Cody's name until he feels like he's ready, or until the round table when it's time. Rachel is still gunning for Kate, of course. This brilliant rivalry between the two of them. And a few people are starting to mention Kyle because of what we've talked about, because he's quite big-mouthed maybe. He's trying to take charge, he's going from person to person, giving his theories, and some people find that a bit too controlling and maybe a bit too, well, they think it's obvious that he's a traitor. We know that he isn't really. My favourite part of these discussions is right before they go into the banishment room, Kate says to Kyle, I'm not voting for you. Kyle says to Kate, yeah, I'm not going to vote for you. 10 minutes later, they vote for one another.
Yeah.
At the round table, we begin with Andy pointing the finger at Kyle and bringing up this idea that he's strategizing a bit too much, and it makes him seem either a bit sneaky or a bit disingenuous. Kyle then takes the opportunity to deflect attention away from himself, and he tells everybody about Cody and what Cody said at breakfast, that Ryan apparently named some suspects before he was killed off. Kyle also claims that Cody is the most likely to be a traitor because he's done it. He says he's done it before twice, and it's not very clear, but it's a reference to the fact that Cody was a contestant on Big Brother in America, and from what I understand, the American Big Brother does involve a bit more sort of planning and scheming and conniving than maybe the British version. So because of the way Cody behaved on that reality programme, Kyle reckons he's a bit of a backstabber and he'd be great at being a traitor. Stephanie also accuses Cody of being quite awkward and quiet, and that's definitely something that I've noticed as a viewer. But, you know, Cody takes the opportunity, becomes a bit louder, he defends himself, he says that he just takes a while to get to know people, he feels a wee bit uncomfortable at first. And I think people buy it. People seem to sort of back off him at that point. Rachel then turns to Kate because she hates Kate and is backed up by Stephanie. What I find really interesting at this point is that we talked a little bit about Christian earlier being really sort of effervescent and constantly upbeat and maybe not a great actor. No one has ever brought up Christian at the round table. His name doesn't really ever seem to come in it. He's kind of getting away with this like really mad act.
Yeah, I thought early on when Brandy mentioned him really early on, Christian, I thought, yeah, she's pretty sharp. She's spotted what I thought, as we talked about earlier, maybe a little bit of overacting. He maybe spotted that, but ever since that, it's never been brought up, and he seems to be going completely under the radar. There was a lot of tension between Stephanie and Kate, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, Kate is great TV during the voting every single time. Lots of eye rolls. Gives the impression that she, in a way, on one hand is very annoyed, on the other hand kind of couldn't care less about all this and is quite flippant, which is really, would probably be quite annoying if you were actually there trying to play the game with her, but is brilliant TV as a viewer.
Yeah.
And after all the votes are cast, Kate ends up with 4 votes, Kyle ends up with 9, and we realise that Kyle is, of course, going to face banishment. Yeah. It's kind of wild to me that no one voted for Cody after what Kyle told them. Cody manages to completely escape this weird lie that he told, which is quite impressive. Again, there's a bit of tactical voting that comes into play, and this is something that happened in the previous episode when Michael turned over his vote. Now, Michael ended up being voted out, but before that, he turned over his vote for Kate and said, Kate, I don't actually think you're a traitor. I'm just trying to save myself. Yeah. And this happens again here. Kyle says that actually he wants to vote for Cody, but he realises that there's no point because he hasn't convinced enough people. So he feels like he kind of has to vote for Kate, which is, I mean, what do you think you would do in this situation? Would you stick with your instincts, or do you think you might go with the crowd because there's strength in numbers?
Yeah, because it's got so tactical, isn't it? Because there's still so many people clearly looking to get Kate out, particularly Stephanie, Rachel. They want Kate out. I think that she's always going to get a proportion of the votes. But it does feel like she might never get enough to go, you know. She seems to avoid, but because she's been in that situation at almost every round table in some shape or form. So it feels like Kate will take some of the votes. So there'll have to be a little bit of tactics, but maybe they would all be better just going with their instincts and thinking a little bit less about who they like and who they don't like. It feels like there's a popularity thing going on, and
I think you're right. The idea of a popularity contest becomes a big part of the voting system. Yeah. Now, after Kyle is given the most votes and he stands in the circle of truth, he's got this great sort of leaving speech where he very unsubtly points towards Cody as a traitor. He implies that Cody's tricked them all. And he tells them, my behaviour changed because I actually started to figure it out. You all got played, take note, and then reveals that he's a faithful. Off he goes. The players start to have some more discussions about what's just happened, and it seems like maybe Cody's in the spotlight, and they're starting to think, oh, maybe Kyle was trying to tell us something there. However, in this game, suspicions seem to change so quickly, so who knows? By tomorrow, will they remember this? Will they have moved on to somebody else? Who knows? Now, the episode comes to a close with the traitors meeting to discuss who they want to murder tonight. Now, Alan talks directly to the viewers and tells us that Amanda has had to leave So we know that she's out of the running. She's not going to be someone up for murder tonight. The traitors start to discuss Cody's dumb statements. Cerise seems really annoyed at him. I mean, so far Cerise doing a great job of being a traitor. She's kind of flying under the radar. She seems like a good actress. So I think she gets really, really frustrated with the other two when they do daft things or they draw attention to themselves. At this moment, there's a bang on the door. The door opens. We cut to some reaction shots of the traitors who seem totally shocked by what's happening, and the episode ends there. So, John, you don't know what's coming next. What are your theories here? What are your predictions? Who's at the door?
Well, I might have misheard this at the start, but I thought right at the very start that Alan said there'd be 4 traitors. Right? I thought he said that. So I was quite surprised when there was only 3. So I wondered if there's someone else in there who is a traitor that we haven't, up to this point, haven't known about.
A secret traitor?
A secret traitor. That one of them was being put in there to, I don't know, be a traitor against the traitors and the faithfuls.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it was a surprise, because if anyone's at that door, then obviously they're going to know that, and the game's up at that point, so there has to be. So I thought he said there was 4 traitors at the very start of it, and I was surprised that there was only 3, but I kind of moved on. I thought, I've got that wrong, and after I watched the end of it, I was like, did he say there was 4, and is there somebody else in there who's also a traitor and has been keeping an eye on both parties? Okay. So, I don't know. That's my theory.
Okay. I will neither confirm nor deny that.
No.
If you were a traitor, is there anyone you would have your eye on for murdering next?
Yeah, Stephanie.
Okay, why Stephanie? Because
Stephanie she's starting to doubt a couple of things about Cerise, because she's thinking, I've got a relationship with her.
Yep.
She's fixated a little bit on Kate at the moment, but to me, killing Stephanie, that would keep the eye on Kate to a certain degree, and I think Kate will survive in spite of the eyes on her, because I think that there's so many things have happened that in other directions that they keep getting drawn away from, so she never quite gets enough votes. So I'd want to keep an eye on Kate, but for some people it would be too obvious if she killed Stephanie, so I would do the obvious one if it was Kate this time, because most of the time they've tried to murder someone who is throwing a spanner in the works to kind of make that doesn't make any sense. Well, I would do one that kind of does make sense.
Okay. Now, some overall thoughts on the traitors. How do you think they're doing? Is there anyone you think you can see making it to the end? Is there any of the traitors you think might not last much longer?
I think Cody's on borrowed time.
Okay.
I think I don't know if he's just struggling with having to work behind everyone's back, because I think maybe there's a bit of him that wants to be popular and wants to be friends with people, and he struggles a little bit with that. Christian, I think he's a bit madcap, but I think he'll be okay. I think he's comfortable with it, and then am I right in saying he's a veteran?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so he'll be comfortable under stress, so he'll be okay with stuff like that. But I think Cerise is really good. I think I think she'd be really convincing as not being a traitor if you were there.
Yes.
And she hasn't made many mistakes, and people seem to like her. And she's not overly mouthy, and she's not too opinionated. She's not drawing attention to herself. So I think she's got a real chance.
I think you're right about that. She seems to have people's trust, and I reckon one of the ways of surviving as a traitor in this game is to make friends, is to make people like you and trust you. Now, John, before we move on to our Traidar Traitor reveal, you've got some exciting things coming up with the band that you're going to tell us about?
Yeah, Bison Hip. We've just finished mixing our new album. So we've got a single coming out in early February. And then the album comes out on the 8th of April. We'll be launching the album that very day in HMV in Glasgow. So come down and see us live that afternoon. And then after that, our first gig after that is in May. On May the 28th, we are appearing at the Glasgow Blues and Rock Festival in Oranmore. It's going to be a great day with us, a number of other bands, and my friend Ainsley Lister is the headline. He's fantastic, so it's going to be a brilliant day. So we're going to be looking to get everybody down there to catch us on our first show.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Lots of different things coming up there to look forward to.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're really excited about it. We're really buzzing about the album and buzzing about that first gig and getting out in front, playing in front of people. It's exciting stuff.
And where can people find out more about Bison Hip online, John?
You can find us at bisonhip.com. We're on everywhere, all the usual places: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've got loads and loads of videos up there. You can find all our music in the usual places: Amazon, Apple, Spotify. With 2 EPs that are out already and the album coming soon. So yeah, we're out there. You can just look for us at bisonhip.com.
Fantastic. And I'll share all of those details on the show notes for the episode.
Excellent, that's great.
Now it's time for our Traidar Traitor reveal.
Ooh. Ah.
So throughout the episode, John, I have told you a lie. Did you tell me a lie?
I did.
Okay. I'm going to guess your lie. Now, I've got this wrong every time so far,
right,
but I'm going to go for it here. I can't think of that many things that you told me that could be false, except, is it a lie that you had a caravan in Aberfeldy?
Yeah, it was in Patrick.
Yay! I got it.
Well done.
First time I've detected a lie.
I actually gave you 2.
Oh.
Because I said that I was a big fan of the Olympics and I hate the Olympics. so therefore, there was 2 there you could have had. But yeah, the Olympics one was a bit of a kind of last minute thought, but the Aberfeldy one was we had a caravan in Port Patrick. So yeah, you got me.
Any idea what I told you a lie about?
I think you lied about having medals on the side of the board there. I don't think you've got all those medals written on a piece of paper on the side of your board.
Oh.
Have you?
I'm going to hold a bit of paper up to the camera.
You have?
I actually do have that on.
Yeah, right, okay.
I have a cast list of
right,
who everybody
okay.
is, what shows they've been on, and I have a wee note for Ryan, 12-time Olympic swimmer. Yeah.
Wow, you're very detailed then. Well done.
Shall I reveal my lie to you?
Yeah.
It was about the programme, it was about Alan. I made up a lie that after 5 or 6 episodes, he was told
throwing a thing.
Yeah, he wasn't really told to stop throwing their pictures on the floor by the owners of the house. That was just total nonsense.
Right, okay. I didn't think that at the time, but then when you said you had 12 on, I thought he's never going to have that on the board. Oh well done.
I tricked you. I got away with it. Hooray!
Good. Well, so, you would be a better traitor than me then.
Maybe I would. Well, John, it's been fantastic having you as a guest on this episode of The Traidar. Hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thanks for having me. It was great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Traidar. Again, it's great to see the listener numbers climbing. Please give the podcast a follow on whatever platform you're using, and leaving a quick review would be really appreciated too, to help spread the word. You can get in touch and take part in podcast polls and questions on Instagram at The Traidar Podcast, or on Twitter at The Traidar Pod, or you can email at thetraidarpodcast@gmail.com. I'll talk to you next time for episode 6. In the meantime, stay faithful.